Hey guys, welcome to the Bin Zone After Show Dance of the Dragons. Today we're talking about House of the Dragons Season 2, Episode 2. The episode really is about the after effects of Episode 1. Like Episode 1 and 2 could be combined to be one singular episode because there's a lot to unpack in this episode. And let's just start with the beginning. The episode starts off and initially it's the immediate after effect of what has happened. It's both sides reeling from it, and we're mainly following the characters that are in the castle now. It's mainly the High Towers and what's going on with them. We know that Aegon loved his son, and because he loved his son, the things that he's going through now, Aegon is going through it. Alicent, Otto, the entire castle is being evacuated because at this point they don't know what's going on. One of the crown princes was killed in his bed. Nobody is safe. And that's the terror that Daemon instilled in these characters. This war, this Dance of the Dragons, this battle for the throne is not one where you can just fight and go to sleep. We see it book in the episode. The start of the episode starts off with the after effects of them getting their castle stormed and killed in their bed. And at the end of the episode, we see Rhaenyra going through the exact same thing as well. And that's where we have to look at these characters and be like, it's not just a war that's going to be fought on Dragonback. It's a war of trust. Because remember, it's a family splitting apart. Aegon's son is dead. Rhaenyra's son is also dead. She can't let that happen. Like, she couldn't let it go unanswered. But it was never her intentions to kill her little sister's kid. It was always after Aemon, she had to drag her into it because Daemon brought her into it. But we're gonna get into Daemon and Rhaenyra's power struggle later. Alicent and Criston Cole. These characters, I have to say, are the catalyst of everything that's going on in House of the Dragons that's amiss. It is their fault that all of this is happening. And her relationship and her sanctimoniousness and just the way that she sits high and mighty as though her shit don't stink. And even after her grandkid is killed, even after all that, she still finds a way to make it about her and her situation where she tries to blame Criston Cole first. Did you tell anybody? And she's so worried about just her public image, her public persona. It's her fault this is happening. It's Criston Cole's fault this is happening. Both of them were not at their post, and now the prince, Aegon's treasure, Aegon's son is dead, and Aegon is livid. He wants war. We're seeing just how the Targaryens really process grief when it comes to Aegon. Aegon is the king now, and he wants bloodshed. It's not about peace. It's not about did Rhaenyra do it or not. He doesn't even need proof. I mean, put two and two together. We killed her son. Now my son is dead. That's all the justification he needs to blame Rhaenyra. And even though Rhaenyra's his sister, there's one, an age gap, and two, Rhaenyra always felt threatened by Aegon because he was Viserys' firstborn heir. So that always lingered over her shoulder. The threat of Aegon always lurked behind Rhaenyra's back. So Aegon always knew this. So their relationship was always stiff. It was never loving because he was always her biggest op, her biggest threat. So when he finds out that his son is dead, it's on like Donkey Kong. But before we get into that, I remember last week's live stream, I said something interesting. And in that live stream, I talked about Aemon. And I said Aemon, once he found out that they were after him, how he would react to this. Because I said it. I knew it and it was bound to happen. Aemon went back to his room and Aemon saw that they went into his room. And what I called last week is they took the gold coins off his table, and that would be a dead giveaway that they were after him. So his nephew dying is ultimately on him because of what he did to Luke. And we're going to get into Aemon and his weird, what is up with the Targaryens and just their weird fascination with just weird kinky sex shit when it comes to the Targaryens, right? It doesn't just stop at the incest. It's always some weird fetishized power thing. But ultimately, Aegon wants war. Aemon is well aware that his brother wants war and they're ultimately after him. And the Greens themselves realize that, hey, they struck the first blow. There's various ways that we can attack this. But before we just focus on the Greens, I want to take a moment to actually talk about a character that even though they received some screen time this week, they really didn't get a lot. And I want to take this time to talk about Helaena, because Helena's character she suffered through the most this season. It's her kid that died, but ultimately we're all focused on the other characters, and Helena had to go. And the plan that Otto brought together to publicize this death of Jaehaerys in front of the small folk, to win their favor, to parade this kid's dead body, like, even though it's a heinous act, even though the characters themselves are grieving, Otto still finds a way to turn this around. Otto's character and his cunningness is really what they need. The fact that Aegon has dismissed Otto, that's his biggest mistake. That's biggest mistake number one. The first mistake was Aemon eating Luke, but this is going to be a crucial mistake because now they're left with nothing but hotheads, and no one's going to listen to Alicent. And the fact that they dismissed Otto, Aegon is on a warpath. The Greens are set. I don't have as much pity for Alicent like I do Helena. Helena literally is the only Targaryen in the show like that hasn't done anything to fuck with anybody. Helena's character, she's been nice. She's been sweet to almost everybody. Even her relationship with Aegon, she understands what her brother is, and she has to do being her sister bride. She is the sweetest Targaryen here. That's why even when I'm talking about the battles between both sides, I consider her a non-factor. Yes, she has a dragon, but no one expects much out of Helena. Even with Aegon's relationship with her, even after they lost their child, when they were passing each other on the steps, Aegon didn't even bother to console his wife. Forget about his sister. He didn't even console his wife, his life partner, the mother of the child. That's on two folds he failed her. As her older brother and as her husband, he failed her on both ends. The only character on the Greens that I truly feel sorry for is Helena. But I do want to take a moment to talk about Blood and Cheese for a second. Aegon is really on a warpath. So when he finally catches him, and when it comes to Blood and Cheese, Blood wasted no time. The moment Larys walked in there, he snitched. It was Daemon. He called for it. He gave up everything. They didn't even touch him yet. And then Aegon came and beat the shit out of him, as he should. You were the guy who insisted on it. And it was him who really did the hacking, all for a cup of gold. And now you think Aegon's just gonna let shit slide? That just doesn't happen. We shift over from the Greens and we go to the Blacks. And Rhaenyra just found out that this happened. Like, even Rhaenyra was in shock. Because remember I said last week, when it comes to all of this, Rhaenyra wanted Aemon. Daemon doesn't care who he goes after. Daemon is okay with just getting his vengeance. He doesn't care. Once Rhaenyra gave the okay, Daemon was good to go, and it was on. So Rhaenyra finding this out, Rhaenyra's genuinely shocked at what happened, and the fact that the High Towers wasted zero time in spreading the false narrative that it was. I mean, is it a false narrative if it is her? Because even though it wasn't Rhaenyra per se that did this, it was her telling Daemon that she wants Aemon, and he went ahead and he did what she asked. But ultimately, Daemon doesn't care. Daemon wanted war, and Daemon thought of one thing and one thing only, and that is getting his revenge. Rhaenyra and Daemon really get into it. Rhaenyra had no idea Daemon was doing this. Rhaenyra did not support it in any way, shape, or form, but Daemon went ahead and he didn't care. Even in the small council meeting, even when the Blacks were meeting and talking about it, everyone was devastated, and everyone could feel the sense of unease at the table. Everyone could feel like Daemon just didn't give a fuck about his nephew, cousin, son, brother-in-law, whatever. He didn't give a fuck about Jaehaerys because he knew blood had to be spilled. And like I said last week, when they asked Daemon, hey, what happens if we don't find Aemon? Daemon never liked the High Towers. He never liked the fact that Viserys brought them into the fold. So when Daemon had the chance, he was always going to take his revenge on the High Towers. It was only a matter of time, and now that he finally had some justification for it, he went for it, and he was at that table gleaning. And so when him and Rhaenyra go back and they talk in private and she starts calling him out on his bullshit, because ultimately everything that Daemon has done was in his own self-interest to get closer to the Iron Throne, even though he's married to Rhaenyra. It's him moving and inching his way closer to what he truly believed is his birthright. And that argument brought everything to light. Because when Rhaenyra called him out on it and he eviscerated Viserys, granted, Viserys was a weak king. We're not going to pretend that King Viserys, even though he was a good guy, was a good king. He was a weak king, And all of this is a byproduct of him splintering his family, not uniting the dragons, and instead letting the Hightowers get a hold of who he is. So all of this is a byproduct of his failed leadership, and Daemon has every right to call that out. Daemon has known Viserys longer than anyone else. That's his older brother. That's who he was raised with. And Viserys himself even admitted that he was jealous of Daemon. He was. Daemon was a warrior. Daemon was powerful. Daemon tamed his own dragon. Even though Viserys had one, when his dragon passed, he never went after it. Like, he was building Legos instead of going after conquest. So Daemon knew this, and the fact that Viserys brought the Hightowers in, he finally got his revenge, but that put him at odds with Rhaenyra because he believes that Viserys made her queen to spite him. And if we're being honest, we can kind of agree to a certain extent that he did spite Daemon. That was making Rhaenyra queen was just Viserys' way of stopping Daemon from becoming king, because he felt that Daemon he couldn't trust them. All Daemon wanted was his brother's love, respect, and trust. But because Daemon's actions and the way he moves, Viserys could not trust them, and therefore Viserys could not make him king, thus making Rhaenyra queen, and ultimately to cause the war. It was Viserys making Rhaenyra queen. The realm was never going to accept her as queen, especially when there was claimants to her throne. If he would have made Daemon the heir, Daemon would have ruled with an iron fist, yes, but this civil war would not happen. The death of the Targaryens would not be happening before our very eyes, and the House of the Dragon would be united. Viserys would not have married Alicent in the first place in order to have these other kids as claimants to the throne. So there would have been a time of peace and prosperity for the Targaryens, but ultimately that didn't happen. It never sat right with Daemon, and the fact that Rhaenyra is bringing it up, Daemon doesn't like that. And they get into a fight, and she wants him to swear his fealty, and he does swear his fealty, but to the Iron Throne of their family, to Viserys' throne and not Rhaenyra's throne, thus making Daemon, where his allegiance lies, it's kind of 50-50, but I do believe Daemon is going to honor the fact that Rhaenyra is queen, because Jacaerys is married to his daughter Baela. That allows him, even though he doesn't get to be on the Iron Throne, Baela and Jacaerys will have a child that is Daemon's grandchild that will sit on the Iron Throne. That is Rhaenyra's grandchild that will sit on the Iron Throne. Daemon is going to support Rhaenyra because of his daughter Baela. Baela's child has legitimately the strongest claims to the Iron Throne. She will be the direct daughter, granddaughter, great-granddaughter of Viserys, Rhaenyra, and therefore Daemon himself, uniting his house like Daemon always wanted to. Since the first season, Daemon always saw the dragon as himself, Rhaenyra, and Viserys. Those three should have always been the ruling party of the realm, and their granddaughter will be the encapsulation of that. So his allegiance to Rhaenyra is there, even though she's questioning him, even though they're going back and forth, and they are arguing, they are fighting. It's a serious conflict. Daemon will stop at nothing. We see Daemon is willing to kill children. He's willing to kill his own brother's grandchildren. So when he storms off and Baela is talking to Jace, we do learn some interesting stuff. I do want to take a moment to speak about Jace and the complexity of it all, because Jace is Rhaenyra's son. He is next in line for the throne, but he is not Laenor's son. He knows he's not Laenor's son. Therefore, he knows he's a bastard, and he knows Strong is his father. So he knew both father figures, both his father, Laenor, or father, Laenor Velaryon, and his actual birth father, Sir Harwin Strong. He knows both of them. Both of them kind of raised them, and he sits in this gray area where he knows he's a bastard, so he has the chip on his shoulder. He has to try to push past it, but at the same time, he has to be at peace with it. And when he's talking to Baela, and Baela also knows this is the worst kept secret in all of Westeros. The only person who was ignorant of it all was Viserys, and Viserys kind of knew that ultimately it wasn't what he thought it was, but Baela knows, and Baela understands the complexity of it all. Baela brought up an interesting point I never thought of. Daemon is a terrible father. Daemon is a terrible husband. Daemon was a terrible king, and she doesn't know if she loves Daemon because Damon is twofolds. He's a terrible father, but at the same time, he's a great man. So she has this, it's kind of like she's in the middle as well. And it's weird that the next generation are inheriting the sins of their parents. Bela understands what she must do with Jay. She understands that she has to marry her cousin at this point. He's her stepbrother, but not her real brother. Like, it's a weird relationship, but they are the least related by blood. And they're actually friends. They actually like each other. Unlike Aegon and Helena, they actually like each other. They got to grow up around each other and they support each other. So she supports him and she knows his true lineage. But she also knows that their kid will be the one who sits on the Iron Throne. Their kid is going to be the one that unifies this. And once they have a child, that deads all the bastard talk, because that child will be legitimately the grandson of Rhaenyra and the grandson of Daemon. Jace right now has no Valerian blood, but their child will have Valerian blood, so he will have the right to sit on the Iron Throne. That is something they know. That's something they have to reconcile with while they fight this war. And it's heavy. It's weird because it's the next generation that has to wear the heavy. Even when it comes to Rhaenyra, Viserys is dead and Rhaenyra has to be the one who has to carry the toll. The next generation, her father died and she has to wear the indecision. Just like when Jaehaerys died, he passed it on to Viserys, and Viserys had to keep the realm together when Rhaenys should have been queen. Or he could have passed it to Daemon, but he didn't want to give it to Daemon. So every generation leaves a mess for the next one. And Rhaenyra has to deal with her mess. But at the same time, she's also leaving mess for her son to deal with when she's no longer on there. Because let's say Rhaenyra dies now. Let's say mysteriously Rhaenyra dies and the crown falls to Jaehaerys. Daemon's not following this guy. Corlys and them aren't following him. It's all going to go to shit because he's a bastard. You see what predicament she kind of puts him in? But that's just the theme of it all. In all honesty, despite Otto Hightower's meddling, despite Rhaenyra's triflingness, despite Daemon's pettiness, besides Viserys' incompetence, the biggest catalyst for the Dance of the Dragons, the biggest reason why all of this is happening is Sir Criston Cole. The hypocrisy, what he did to Eric, what he did to the twin, when he called them out in front of the rest of the King's Guard, he had the gall to ask him, where were you? When the king needed you, where were you? He went and blamed an innocent man because he knew ultimately that he was at fault. Instead of owning his part in it, his sin, no, it's somebody else's fault. He passed the buck yet again. I want to say it's crazy because he not only besmirched the honor of the queen, he not only did that twice to Rhaenyra and now to Alicent, but he caused these brothers, granted, I'm gonna get into Eric and Eric a little later, because I understand oath and loyalty, but you guys went and fought and killed each other for your loyalty to a family that's fighting and killing themselves. The fight between those two characters, it's essentially a macro version of the Dance of the Dragons. Twin brothers, family, shared in blood, one soul split in part, one dragon, the House of the Dragon split into two halves, and it's a foreshadowing of what's to happen next. They are going to kill each other. That's the only way the House of the Dragon ends, with the two brothers, with the two sides, with the greens and the blacks ultimately killing one another. And the fact that the show is showing these, like, what I like about House of the Dragons, what really makes it a show that should be talked about and is enjoyable, even for those who read the books, what makes it really enjoyable is the fact that it's good storytelling shown on screen. They've showed us time and time again. They're dropping Easter eggs. They're dropping little nuggets showing, hey, this is the end result of this. These two are split apart and now they're fighting. And you know who caused it? Criston Cole. The one King's Guard caused a rift in these brothers' family, caused a rift in the House of the Dragon, and his hypocrisy knows no bound. He's not gonna stop here. We're gonna get to that little part at the end. And guys, I will be doing a video on Alicent and Criston Cole's relationship. So if you guys are new here, hit the subscribe button because I have a very interesting theory, thought, and just breakdown of not just their relationship, the overall impact that it has on the story, their hypocrisy, and what they did to Rhaenyra, and how they destroyed this woman's life and character, and how ultimately they're destroying their realm because they can't honor oaths. I will be dropping that video this week, and it's going to be very interesting because we're going to break down from the first season all the way into now everything Christian Cole has done, everything Allison has done, and everything Rhaenyra has done, and how it pans out in this season and how it's causing this rift and ultimately destroys the House Targaryen. But now let's talk about Aemond. Like I said earlier in my last week's live chat, if you guys weren't there, I said Aemond was going to find out it was originally after him. Aemond knew he did the first blow. He attacked, he killed Luke, and he always thought that they would come after him. But it's this weird warped sense of self that all the Targaryens seem to have. That scene with Aemond at that brothel when he was doing, I don't know what he was doing, but a few things stood out to me. One, y'all saw his body? No, seriously. Did y'all see Aemond Targaryen's body in that scene? It's all weird and contorted, malnourished. It's as though he's living purely on hate and regret. That's the only thing fueling him, I feel like. And his body shows it. It's contorted, it's skinny, his ribcage showing. And he's paying a hooker, but not just any hooker. It's the first hooker to take his virginity when he went to the brothel. She's, at this point, she's old. She's kind of plump. There's nothing wrong with having a little meat on your body. But in that realm, in that occupation, I wouldn't say she's a high earner. But he sits down at her bosoms and he's like a little baby, butt-ass naked, sitting at her titty. He looks like he sucks on it and he's pouring out his heart to her and she's consoling him. And she says a very important point that I brought up in my last live stream, but I'm gonna get to that when I get to it. But Aemond himself is thinking about just what happened. They came after him and he believes that Daemon sees him as a threat. He wants Daemon's approval. Aegon and Daemon have a weird relationship. Viserys named Aemond after his brother Daemon, and he tries to be like Daemon. He's trying to be a rogue, brutish prince. Like, he's heard the legends of Daemon. Daemon turned the gold cloak into something. Daemon has won wars. Daemon is a dragon rider extraordinary and has fought in battles, and his legend precedes him. Aemond hasn't done that yet, but with his admiration of Daemon and the fact that he always heard stories of Daemon, because Daemon himself has never really been in these kids' lives. Daemon is not even in his own kids' lives, let alone to be in his brother's kids' lives. So there was always a gap of admiration there with Aemond and Daemon, but he never got to actually experience his uncle. And when he finally met Daemon, Daemon was firmly on Rhaenyra's side. Daemon didn't give a fuck about the Hightowers or their lineage. Daemon doesn't even, I don't feel like Daemon even gives Aemond a second thought. But when we find him in this brothel, he's talking as though Daemon sees him as a threat. He's like, hey, he tried to assassinate me. He thinks I'm dangerous. I must really be that guy. And it's like, no, Rhaenyra asked for your head because you killed her son. Daemon doesn't care about Aegon. Daemon doesn't care about Helena. He cares about Otto Hightower and his clutch and his grasp on the Iron Throne. You guys are just a byproduct of his brother's weakness, and he wants them out of there. And the crazy part about all of it is, why does Aemond show a sense of humility? He does regret killing Luke. That doesn't change my thoughts on him, but at the same time, I also have to think about the fact that Aemond is only 16 years old. We forget in the first season, Jace, Luke, and Aegon used to bully Aemond when he didn't have a dragon. They took Aemond's eye, granted, he was being a little shit, he lost his eye, but they took his eye out and his father did not take a stand for him. He suffers second son syndrome. He will never be the heir to the Iron Throne. I mean, granted, there's ways that it could happen with succession and things like that, but because he's the second son, Rhaenyra was heir, and if Rhaenyra dies, it goes to Aegon, and then if Aegon dies, it goes to Aegon's son or Rhaenyra's son. So Aemond never really had any grasp at the Iron Throne. So he was never in Viserys' forethought. His hero Daemon never thought about him. Rhaenyra always had her head on a swivel looking at Aegon, never thought about Aemond. Now he's important. And now he thinks that they're after him, when in reality, if you never killed Luke, they're not even thinking about you. But he is the Team Green's best fighter. Like, we're not gonna act like he's a nobody. When it comes to the Greens, he is their best fighter. He has the biggest dragon, so he is their biggest military might. But ultimately, that's the only reason why he's of relevance here. It's so weird because Aegon is the king, Helena is the queen, Aemond is the brother to the king, and yet they're not the principal antagonists. They all have dragons. They're the biggest weapons of Team Green, yet they're not the biggest factor. Like, realistically, killing Aegon should have been first on the list. Daemon wants them to hurt. Rhaenyra wants Aemon to hurt. And it's just funny that the common folk are playing a big part in this season. They're playing a big part in this conflict because we're watching the common folk turn on Rhaenyra, calling her a defiler. The propaganda that the Hightowers and Team Green worked on to besmirch her name and blame her for the death of young Jaehaerys. And the blockade. Remember, Rhaenyra is blocking food from entering King's Landing. So not only is she killing kids, she's starving King's Landing out. Even though it's a war tactic, even though it's smart of her to do, Otto is using this. The Greens are using this as a way to put the small folk against Rhaenyra. It's working great. We're introduced to a character named Hugh and his wife, and they're talking about just how hard it is to get by and how the rich are now hoarding the food. And we know what that means. The rich are the people in the Red Keep. The rich are the Targaryens. Remember last episode when Aegon was giving out all the favors to the common folk and Otto kept coming saying, nah, we're not doing that. Coming back and saying, nah, we're not doing that. But yet they're starving. The people are blaming Rhaenyra, and Aegon does something that really sets the cause back realistically. And you can't really blame Aegon for it, because they killed his son. He's grieving. Aegon is grieving, but at the same time, they catch every rat catcher and they hang them. But rat catchers aren't people. They have families, they have sons, they have daughters, they have people who love them, but Aegon doesn't care. They killed his son. He's going to make an example out of them and to show that he's not weak. But that's going to be his biggest downfall, because that puts him in direct conflict with everything Otto has worked for. Otto Hightower and Aegon have a conflict this episode, and I don't know if you guys have noticed this, starting back with Game of Thrones, the Hand of the King and the King are always butting heads. And granted, the Hand of the King is the second most powerful person in the realm. His word is the word of the king, but I wouldn't want that position. You're always fighting against the king. You're always looking with your head on a swivel, and ultimately, realistically, the king is going to do what the king wants to do. Otto went ballistic, clashing with Aegon. Aegon ultimately did what Viserys never had the spine to do. Otto has been hand to the king to 3 kings, and none of them had the spine to really fire him. Rhaenyra had to basically bargain with Viserys to fire Otto, but not Aegon. I said it last week, and I'll say it again. Aegon has the blood of the dragon in him. Aegon is a Targaryen through and through. Say what you will about Otto Hightower. Otto Hightower has always been about the realm. His methods may not have been the best methods, but he's always prioritized stability in the realm. Viserys was a good king, and he made sure Viserys stayed on the throne. Even though he usurped Rhaenyra's throne, it was for the good of the realm. A lot of the people in the realm just would not bow to a queen. They would have to have been done so through fire and blood, and he was trying to avoid that. But at the same time, we're not going to ignore the fact that he is power hungry. His daughter became the queen. His grandson is king. His line is forever intertwined with the Iron Throne. He's not okay with just them sitting on the Iron Throne. He has to be the one controlling it all, and that's ultimately where his downside is. You know, when someone controls too much and they hold onto the rope too tight, that's Otto. And Viserys, I said this last week and I'll repeat it. Viserys Targaryen was not a true Targaryen. He had the name, he had the blood, but he was not of the blood of the dragon. Daemon, who's blood of the dragon, despises Otto. Aegon, blood of the dragon, can't stand his grandfather, fired him. But if I had to choose between Otto and Sir Criston Cole, the Greens are fucked. They think they're handing over their lives to a smart man, a decent man. But we all know Criston Cole is not any of that. If Aegon knew Criston was smashing his mom, what do you think Aegon's gonna do if he found out? And yet, Criston Cole keeps falling upwards. He keeps falling upwards, and now he's Lord Commander of the King's Watch, and he's also Hand of the King. And I'm sitting here watching, and you know he has it for Rhaenyra. He blames Rhaenyra for the fact that he can't keep it in his pants and he likes smashing queens. He's going to put the entire war efforts into killing Rhaenyra. Even when Otto was talking to him about their plan, and he's like, hold on, what is the plan? You guys are gonna send a twin to go act like another twin. Otto was shocked at the stupidity of their plan, which is crazy because the plan itself almost worked. But this is what Christian's gonna do. He's going to focus solely on destroying Rhaenyra, which wouldn't be a problem if I'm looking at this from both sides and I'm being a neutral party. Christian Cole objectively is going to waste all their resources on trying to kill Rhaenyra. Instead of owning up to the fact that he is a weak man, he's going to try to kill Rhaenyra instead. And I believe that that is the greatest mistake that he can do, but ultimately that's not going to stop him from doing it. But now that creates a big dilemma, right? Because these two sides are fighting. It's the blacks versus the greens. Rhaenyra has the legitimate claim. Rhaenyra also has the most dragons, but yet at the same time, does it feel to you like Rhaenyra is losing this war? Think about it for a second. The people have turned against her. Granted, some of them are turning against Aegon because of the whole rat catcher thing, but for the most part, the people have turned against her. They already have a king, and realistically, common folk really care about one thing and one thing only, and that's peace and stability. But they know that it is Rhaenyra causing the blockade. Rhaenyra killed the heir, and she's a woman, remember? And don't forget, Rhaenyra has bastards on her side. Like, the small folk are aware of all of this. But while we like Rhaenyra as our favorite character, per se, she is losing this war, which is crazy to say, but ultimately in PR, in the world of House of the Dragons, to the masses, to the small folk, to everybody around, we are the viewers, so we have a different perspective, but the people of that world are looking at it and saying, why should I support her when she's a woman? The realm has chosen a side. Rhaenyra and Daemon and the Valerians are rebels, technically speaking. Even though Viserys named them as heir, they are rebels and they're fighting for their birthright. Speaking of birthright, Alan's brother Adam has shown up. Adam has black hair and Alan is bald. I still say Alan is bald because he cuts off his silver hair. And this week reaffirms my theory. If you guys didn't see my last week's live stream and you guys didn't watch the video on my channel, go check that out, where I think and talk about the fact that Alan may be a secret Valerian and a secret Targaryen. And this episode, this scene right here between these brothers truly encapsulate that, because Adam says something very interesting to Alan. He says that Corlys owes you. He owes us. Why does he owe you exactly? Unless, like I said, that's his son. And when it comes to Adam, I saw a few of my comments saying that Adam in the books is the one that becomes the dragon rider, but he has black hair. And the books and the shows never go hand in hand. They twist and do things and change certain characters. So while in the book it may have been Adam as the dragon rider, and I know Jace and Luke are also dragon riders who don't have silver hair, and we do see a scene in the show where Sea Smoke, Corlys's previous son, flew around Adam, giving us a bigger hint that these guys are Corlys's sons. But he says he owes you, almost as though Adam is excluding himself from what is owed to himself. So if he's excluding himself, it stands to reason that Adam and Alan, yes, are brothers, but only half brothers. Corlys is the father of Alan, but not necessarily the father of Adam. It's a theory, and I do know and I do understand that at the same time, just because you have Targaryen blood doesn't necessarily mean you have white silver hair. We have an example of Rhaenyra's 3 sons, her first 3 sons. I'm gonna get back to these brothers because there's some other brothers I do want to talk about. I do want to take some time to actually talk about the fact that we were introduced to Rhaenyra's other kids this week's episode. We know Rhaenyra has 3 bastard kids with Harwin Strong. They're Laenor's fake kids. Rhaenyra also had a kid that died at the start of the Dance of the Dragons, the season finale of season 1. But we are also introduced to 2 younger kids this episode, her 2 youngest children with Daemon, the silver-haired babies. Rhaenyra actually has full-blooded Targaryen kids. And Rhaenyra has had 6 pregnancies at this point. Jace, Luke, the little baby brown-haired one, I don't know his name, and the 2 silver-haired Daemon kids, and 1 kid who died because of what happened to Viserys. I think that's interesting that they showed these 2 kids, because ultimately when it comes down to House of the Dragons and we make our way back to Game of Thrones, Daenerys and her older brother Viserys and their eldest brother Rhaegar all have silver hair, and their mother had silver hair, and we go back to white people with silver hair. And House of the Dragons makes it a point to show the Valerians are dark skinned or either mixed with silver hair. So either the Valerians' blood dilutes so much with the Targaryens, or these kids play a major part in expanding and continuing the Targaryen bloodline. I thought that was interesting. I saw them and it made me think of Daenerys and the rest of them. But getting back to the Valerians for a second, I think if the comics are true and Adam is the one that rides the dragon in the books, I think the show's gonna twist it and make Alan the dragon rider, because they're adding an importance to him. And the fact that you see Sea Smoke, you see the dragon that used to belong. Wait, hold on. I do want to talk about Corlys for a second. Corlys' biological son, his original firstborn heir to Driftmark, was Laenor. Laenor never died. Laenor escaped and his dragon is still alive. And dragon bonds are for life. The reason I'm bringing this up is because we saw Laenor's dragon Sea Smoke flying around Adam, and it's hinting at Adam claiming it. And I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I did some research into Adam, and Adam in the books, straight up, he's the one who rides Sea Smoke. He rides the dragon. He is the dragon rider of Sea Smoke. But in the show, Laenor is alive. So Adam can't claim the dragon so long as Laenor is alive. So all that with Sea Smoke encapsulating them and flying around Adam and hinting at the books cannot happen because they changed his death, which reinforces my theory that Alan is the dragon rider, not Adam. The show made him with black hair when we know they made the black characters with silver hair. Alan is showing this importance and he's distinguishing the fact, and ultimately, even though it's based on the book, these characters, the canon of them all, I don't think overall matters in the lineages of Targaryens. Alan will be the dragon rider, and I'm trying to figure out what Adam's role is going to be when it comes to the rest of the season. Because if he's not the dragon rider, if he's not Sea Smoke's rider, who is he going to be? What's his overall goal? That's really what I'm interested in going forward, because I said this in another video and I'll say it again in this video. I do enjoy when characters are in books, but they also take liberties in the show to kind of switch things up, so that way, even though you've read the books and people who have not read the books are also surprised. So I wonder where they're going to go with him and just how important Adam and Alan are going to be this season. But moving on from them, Rhaenyra actually has a talk with the White Worm, and she starts to understand the White Worm a little more. And the White Worm and Rhaenyra share something in common. They both were in love with Daemon. Daemon has pretty much screwed them both over, and Daemon has used them. But at the same time, when Rhaenyra doesn't immediately give the White Worm her freedom and grant her that, they do have a conversation, and it does show us something about this character. And the messaging that she gives to Rhaenyra, again, like I said, a reason I enjoy this show is because it's great storytelling. Because while she's talking to Rhaenyra, she's not just talking about their limitations. She's not just talking about what they can and can't do. It's a reflection of Rhaenyra's position as well. Because she says it in a sense that, yes, I'm a whore. I will never be this. They will never let me. The days are Otto Hightower, who represents the men of this kingdom. And even though she clawed her way up from nothing and she made herself all powerful, they burned her house down. And in the same breath, Rhaenyra had to claw from the shadow of all the Targaryen men before her to be heir. And yet that society they live in does not let women prosper, does not let women rule, does not let women have power over men. And I feel like that was a great messaging, because Rhaenys suffers this, Rhaenyra suffers this, the White Worm suffers this, and I'm gonna throw her a bone, Alicent suffers this, as well as Helaena. Ultimately, the women in this world, as powerful as they are, as much maneuverability as they can get, Rhaenyra is queen by all birthrights and by all lands and law of the land. Rhaenyra is queen, yet they took it from her because she's a woman. Rhaenys should have been queen, taken from. Alicent didn't even get to choose who she wanted to marry. Like, let's be honest, Alicent, yes, is fucking Kristen Cole, but from the moment she saw him, she thought he was handsome and she wanted him since she was a child. She wasn't given the opportunity to even follow her own destiny. Her father forced her on Viserys, and she had to lay with that man as he decomposed in real time on top of her. But the White Worm shows that yes, even as women, even no matter how high we climb up, we'll never achieve what the men have. But I'm gonna talk about the White Worm some more, because after Rhaenyra sets her free and she's leaving Dragonstone, Eric escorted her out and she's walking down the path and she sees the other twin and she hesitates for a moment. She could have proved her loyalty to Rhaenyra right there. She could have called him out and had him arrested. But you know what she said? This is not my business. I don't want this to be my business. And ultimately, that's the only way you're going to survive in this story. You either play the Game of Thrones or you die, or just don't play. And the White Worm decided, Missandra decided, the White Worm, she decided, I'm not going to play. I'm leaving. And whatever happens, happens. That's between them. Because she could have easily spotted them out. But hey, that's their business. And the episode proceeds. Eric makes his way to the castle, or Eric, and it's a little cat and mouse gamey. It's going back and forth, and ultimately he gets himself alone with Rhaenyra, and it begets a battle. It reminds me of the battle between the Mountain and the Hound. Two brothers split apart, fighting one another in the name of various factions of the crown, and they kill each other. I mean, there's not much really to go break down into this. I'm gonna say it was tragic, but at the same time, the brother who worked for Team Green deserved to die. You came here with the full intent of killing Rhaenyra, which is cool, whatever. But the moment you stood face to face with your brother, you had a choice to make. You could have defected in the first season, you did not. Right then and there, you could have warned your brother, joined his side, you did not. You killed your brother, because if we're watching the show, I thought I was following the fight close enough where I felt like the one who came in and the one ultimately who took his own life was the brother who came from Alicent's side. He beat his brother and he realized, I killed my brother after spending years of my life protecting not only Rhaenyra, but her father, and he took his own life. Which I said earlier in the video is going to be a referendum on the entirety of the Dance of Dragons. Everyone who chooses a side is splitting themselves into two. There is no winning. There's so many dragons alive in the world right now, and we know for a fact by the time Daenerys comes into power, by the time Daenerys comes of age, there are no dragons in the world. You chose a side, you die. It's simple as that. But we find ourselves back in King's Landing, back with the Greens. Otto's leaving. He realizes just how doomed they are. We find out Alicent and Viserys have another son called Daeron, who lives in Old Town where the Hightowers base are. So that is another dragon rider I didn't account for. That means they have 4 dragon riders, 3 technically, because again, Helena is still Helena. But Otto has a word with his daughter. He realizes just what's about to happen. They're doomed. Christian Cole's an idiot. Aegon is grief-stricken. Aemon wants war. They've banished Otto. The Greens are divided. The Blacks are united, except for Daemon, who's off doing his own thing. Daemon went to Harrenhal, and he's going to claim glory for himself. He didn't go with an army. He took his one dragon. He's going to claim it in the name of Rhaenyra, and that's going to give him glory, because that's the same thing he did with Viserys. But the Greens are divided. Otto is gone. Alicent can do whatever she wants. We all know what she wants to do, and that's Sir Kristen Cole. Can we talk about the last few minutes of this episode? I think Alicent might have lost any redeeming quality she ever had by behaving the way she does. After Helena was traumatized, she found you riding dick. And what do? You go right back. Granted, she went to her room. I'm gonna give her some bail. She went to her room. Christian Cole is the one who got there, and he's the one who was waiting for her. Alicent at least tries to act holier than thou. She tried to confess her sins to Otto because he understands just the depravity that his family suffers, and that's why he feels like he needs to be here. But when her and Christian go back to fucking, the episode pretty much starts off that way and it ends the exact same way. The heir died because you guys were fucking. What if Daemon was not done? Eric is gone because of Christian Cole, and you guys are back at it again. Otto is gone. Someone else dies. But it doesn't matter. I feel like Christian Cole keeps failing upwards. He somehow went from a regular knight to the head of the King's Guard to hand of the king. Like, you could almost feel as though Christian Cole, even though he feels as though what he's doing is wrong, in the same breath, I feel as though he feels though he's justified. The reason I say he feels as though he's justified is because everything he's doing is being rewarded. Fuck Rhaenyra, become a member of the King's Guard and become head of the King's Guard. Fuck Alicent, become hand of the king. Soon he's gonna think he can sit on the Iron Throne at this point because he just keeps failing upwards. And Alicent keeps using herself, using her religion as a way to justify her bullshit, when in all honesty, she's just jealous. She's small, tiny, jealous, and petty. And she's jealous of Rhaenyra because she wants to be Rhaenyra. She's doing everything that Rhaenyra has done. I want to give Alicent the benefit of the doubt and say that she's just being in charge of her own body, that she's just taking her own agency, but that's not the case. Alicent is trying her best to be Rhaenyra. Alicent is trying her best to copy what Rhaenyra has going on. The difference between Alicent and Rhaenyra is that when Rhaenyra was being promiscuous, the only thing she did was jeopardize her own claim and stake to the Iron Throne. The only thing Rhaenyra did was make people question her legitimacy. She never caused anybody to die. She never invoked the gods in her bullshit. The hypocrisy of Alicent knows no bounds, and ultimately it is between her and Criston Cole. Those two are the reasons why this war is happening. I feel like until Criston Cole is dead, the Dance of the Dragons will not end because he has a vendetta against Rhaenyra. More so than anybody else, it is Criston Cole's sole obsessive nature over Rhaenyra, and that is why the Dance of the Dragons is occurring. He deems himself worthy to be with a princess, and the reason I say that is because he was with Rhaenyra, he asked Rhaenyra to marry him. When that did not work, he is now with Alicent. He is now engaged in relationships with Alicent, the current queen, and that's because he sees himself on that level. He has a sense of self-grandeur that he's fighting with. His internal struggle is the fact that he wants more, and the fact that he can snatch queens, he can bag queens. He thinks he deserves more, and now that he's Hand of the King, he feels upwards and he feels justified in his crusade. And that's what makes Criston Cole the most dangerous character on this show. And the war will not end until he's dead and his one-man vendetta against Rhaenyra is over. Thank you for tuning in. Next week, same time, House of the Dragons. I will be dropping a video on Alicent and Criston Cole this week. I will have another video on House of the Dragons and a few more shorts. So stay tuned for that. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the share button. Let people know about the live stream because we'll be doing this every week and we go deep into the episode. But guys, that's it for this video. Hit the thumbs up, give it a subscribe, and until next time, binge on.